So
So
this is already becoming perhaps sort of complicated if people are not familiar with. Um, they'll look at this and see binary, and this is not what it is at all.
is that to represent, because it's four numbers there? Is that to represent left, right, up, and down, or like the corners, or?
You could think of this more like a bit, like a pattern. Forget that there are numbers here. These could be symbols too.
Okay.
All it's saying is that if you want to move right and you're currently in an A-type tile, then the tile that you move to must have this pattern on the edge, 0, 1. But it must be on the left edge because we're moving to the right. The next tile that lines up with this must have a 0, 1 style on the left edge. So again, an A can move into an E because an E starts with a 0, 1 on the left edge. And an L. So those are the two options. An A can transition to the right to a L or a E tile. And then an E tile can move into a, continuing to transition to the right, can move into a D, an H, and an M.
Okay, so that definitely, I mean, it kind of makes sense, but it takes a lot of concentration. Yeah, it's a lot of concentration.
You have to make a set of rules. I'm going to show you the code that does this. I'm going to point people to it. I'm not going to elaborate too much because people have to dig in and look at this document, look at my code. Go, what's going on here? Why is he doing that? Oh, it's not one of those things that I can force you to understand or talk for an hour and you'll get it. It's either you're going to get it or you're not going to get it. So let's take a look at the code.
I wish you'd force me to understand it.
I would force you to understand it if I could. All right, I'm just going to briefly run through this code. So the Lost Garden code is the one that enumerates all the different texture types. First thing it does, it has a big list of all the textures. And then it has some tables that I'm going to use, and what I do is I will study the name of every texture and strip out the parts, like it's a blob 0, or it's a, whatever a P, let's see, a stone 2. And then I'll grab the group type transition to, and I'll strip out the tile type. And so I look at each of these, and I create a list of the known group types, transition tos, tile types, version types, mods. And then I reparse the whole list, and I identify every single texture by its name, and then a table that enumerates the specific components. I've broken it out in advance, so I don't have to parse the name every time. I parse the name one time, and then I have a table that tells me this texture is a group type whatever. This texture has a transition to of whatever. So in the future, for example, tile type, this 0, 1, 1, 0 nonsense we were looking at over here, not really nonsense, but confusing bit perhaps, is stripped out. And then in the future, I can simply look at the tile type and make some kind of decision based on that. Next, I created a table that I called Easy Group Types. And really what it was just a simple shorthand notation, as I said. So later I could pass in B0 and I could pull out blob 0. For what purpose, I do not recall.
It certainly makes it easier to read.
Yeah, I wanted to make it easier to read. And I might have used some of this as purely as documentation, so you see me printing out the group type below instead of looking at it and saying, what's S3? Oh, stone 3. Anyways, let's move on. Forget about this. Okay, so forget about that. I want to find a code that does it. Here it is. Okay, the way I lay out these tiles is I lay them out from the upper left-hand corner, and I move to the right. So I lay out one row of tiles, then I come back to the left, and I lay out the next set of tiles. So my tiles, when I'm laying them out, I'm going left to right, come back down, left to right, etc. If you could watch it happen, you'd see a progression of tiles popping in. And so I'm either moving to the right or I'm moving down. The only time I'm ever moving down is when I go back to the left and I need to look at the tile that was above me. And so, since I only care about to the right and to down, I created two tables. One is called allowed below, and the other one is called allowed to the right. the basis of these tables are saying, let's look at allowed to the right because this is the one that gets used more. Allowed to the right is saying, if I'm currently on an A tile, let's look at the documentation. So an A tile, what tiles am I allowed to select to the right? And I predefined these. I created tables for each. I went through and read the document, and I said A can go to E and to L. So I'm on a tile. It's an A type. I say, what am I allowed to move into next? E and L. And then using this information, I look at my current group of tiles, and I say, okay, are you a E tile? No. Ignore it. Are you an E tile? Ignore it. Are you an E tile? And I just randomly go through these tiles until I find one. And I say, oh, found an E tile. Or I found an L tile. I can use that. And I drop the next tile. Then I move to the right. And let's say that I moved into an E tile. Then I would be in an E tile. And I'd say, I'm still moving to the right. I'm going to lay out another tile to the right. So what am I allowed to do next? I'm in an E tile. Now I can drop a D, a G, an H, or an M. I got a lot of different choices here. So then I randomly select a tile out of my group and say, are you a D, G, H, or M? No. D, G, H, or M? No. D, G, up, found one. I found an H, for example, just randomly. So now I move to an H tile, and I continue to repeat that. Now I can lay out an E or an L. If I lay out an L, I can lay out a B, I, or a J. And then I'll get to the end of the row, and then my algorithm, which you can dig into below, will take us back to the left, change our X position back to the left, and say, what was the last tile that I laid down above this position? It will find that, and it will say, okay, let's say that the tile that was on the very left above me was an F. Well, then I can lay out an A, an E, an H, or an M. I'll randomly select one of those out of my group, and then I'll start going through the allowed to right selection again. So as you can see, mostly it's what tile am I allowed to select to the right, and then which tile am I allowed to select down. And actually, this is not true. If you're thinking about what I'm saying, you're thinking, yeah, but you have to match the one above you too. So in truth, there's a loop down here, which I will encourage people to read through instead of having me enumerate it. That simply goes through and looks to the right, it looks up, and it makes sure that the tile it selects matches both. So my initial example where I said it looks only to the right, not exact, or I'm sorry, it tests only for the right is not true. It tests for the right, and if there's a tile above, it reduces the set of choices to ones that match. In other words, let's say you had a tile. This is very hard to describe without a physical representation. Let me see if I can do this. There's another document you can look at. This one here.
Ed, are you creating the background in one loop?
So I'm sorry, again, please?
So I'm trying to understand if you're creating the background, or you're choosing all these tiles to create entire map just in one loop.
Yeah, it's a loop where I am looping.
So it's
a loop within a loop.
From top left, then you go all the way to down right, and you have your entire map, right?
No, I go all the way to the right, and then I come back to the left, and I do the next row. Yeah, it's a
row by row.
Row by row.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's column by column.
Usually, as I remember, such backgrounds are created a little bit differently. So you first fill up the entire canvas, let's say, with some initial style, like just dirt, and then you are sprouting some little pieces of grass, of stone, of something else on top of it randomly, like. You filled the canvas, then you put in, like, in top left corner there's going to be some stones, in top right there's going to be some blob of grass, and then you, from these seeds, you sprout it to some bigger areas, and sprouting algorithms can be different. For example, stone can generate some rectangular forms, and grass can be like viney, all the stuff. And when you create these areas, you go to the map once again and you smooth out edges of this area so that they will be smooth and transitional from one genome to another genome.
Yeah, no, I could have done that, except for the fact that I didn't have the ability. I did not add the ability to transition from one style of graphic to the next. You're all in Stone 0 or Stone 3, and that is it.